Hello viewers, my name is Andrew Dean. I'm the Vice President of Research and Innovation at Lakehead University, and I'm delighted today to have you join us for the very first edition of Research Matters. This show will inform you about LU's research focus from a broad spectrum of disciplines, from the natural sciences, engineering, health, social sciences, and the humanities, and the relevance and impacts on our societies. You're also going to meet some of our exceptional and brilliant researchers. Striving hard and often without a lot of fanfare, our faculty members and students work really hard to make discoveries and innovations that are making a meaningful contribution to our sustainable future. Community-engaged research for social justice is an important priority for Lakehead University. Our deep commitment is exemplified through several community-based research programs and projects that address topical and pressing issues. Our institution has a long history and reputation of research excellence in community engagement, both regionally and nationally. In 2020, Lakehead University was acknowledged by Research InfoSource as the #1 university in Canada within our peer category for not-for-profit income. In today's show, I'm going to be joined by Dr. Kathy Sanderson. She is an Associate Professor of Human Resources and Organizational Behavior in the Faculty of Business Administration. Kathy is a longtime resident of Northwestern Ontario. She's a registered psychotherapist. Her area of focus are emotional abuse and coercive control of workplace ostracism, and job rejection. Kathy has been providing mental health counseling, program development, and workplace crisis and intervention for over 20 years. Kathy's contribution to advancing employment knowledge and social equity in this region is truly noteworthy. So Kathy, welcome. It gives me great pleasure to speak to you today about some of your various research initiatives. So Kathy, share some of your current research focus with us.
Sure, great. Thank you for having me. So as you mentioned, I have lived in Northwestern Ontario for my entire life. And prior to joining Lakehead University, I was working for community-based organizations in mental health and addictions, violence against women, and Indigenous education. And throughout those jobs, I could see how those social factors affected employees. And so that's how I became interested in studying workplace ostracism, bullying, emotional abuse, and I've really made most of my research focused on different ways to reduce pain at work for employees within Northwestern Ontario.
That sounds really exciting. Tell me about some of the researchers that are involved in some of your projects, some of the students, the faculty, teams, etc.
So all of the research projects that I've worked on have involved interdisciplinary teams. So I have a project that's just wrapping up right now, which is called Welcome NWO. And it is a project that was looking at welcoming and inclusion in Atikokan, Sulikote, and Thunder Bay. And on that project, I have two research assistants. Their names are Julia Whitney and Ryan Huron. Both are graduates from the Faculty of Business Administration's Masters of Science program, and they're both residents of Northwestern Ontario. And along with Dr. Irfan Butt from Ryerson University, we were looking at different ways that communities and organizations can be welcoming to newcomers. And the goal of that research, of course, is to make all organizations more welcoming so that employees want to stay within Northwestern Ontario. So that's one of the research teams. The other research team that I'm working with right now is on a project called Renew NWO. So you start to see I got a bit of a theme in my research. It's all about Northwestern Ontario. And this project is looking at the resilience of newcomer women in Northwestern Ontario and some of the barriers, the unique barriers that exist for newcomers when they're trying to either enter the workforce or throughout COVID trying to remain within the workforce. And that is a partnership and a research team. And so in addition to our research assistants and Dr. Claudio Pusa from the Faculty of Business Administration, we're also working with the Thunder Bay Multicultural Association, the Northwestern Ontario Local Immigration Partnership, and the Rural and Northern Immigration Pilot, which is part of the Community Economic Development Commission of Thunder Bay. And so that project is about developing partnerships and reaching out to newcomer women to find out what would be some of the new and innovative ways that we might be able to engage them and increase their labor participation.
So you're dealing with a lot of new immigrants and new people coming to this region. Is there any kind of apprehension when they engage with these kind of research projects?
It's been really interesting because both of these projects started during COVID. And so we've only been able to connect so far with people over Zoom or on the phone. And of course, we know that there's going to be language challenges. But what we found is that people have been really forthcoming. And our interviewers and our research assistants work really hard to make people feel comfortable and to understand the confidentiality that's associated with research in Canada. And I think that helps. And I think, our topics are all about welcoming and inclusion. So we should be good at making people feel comfortable and sharing their information with us.
So you mentioned some of the partners that are involved in the research and keeping this going. Tell us a bit more about some of the partnerships and some of the ways that they're involved and some of the ways that you want them to be involved, and what are they gaining out of this?
Sure. Well, one of the, I think, huge contributions that our partners have made was the suggestion of what's called a validation committee. And so whenever you are researching people, of course, you want to make sure that you're doing it in as respectful of a way as possible. And because I am not a newcomer, I'm the opposite of a newcomer for Northwestern Ontario, we have a validation committee that we were able to form because of the partnerships that we have with other organizations who are interested in immigration. And that committee helps to guide our research questions and helps to guide our interpretations of the findings. And so it's a group of newcomer women who have been in Northwestern Ontario for approximately 3 to 10 years who help us to interpret and understand our results from the lens of a newcomer woman. And that would not have been possible without our research partners.
That's great. And can you tell us, is there a major funder for some of your projects?
For these projects, our Welcome NWO was funded by the Ministry of Labour, Training and Skills Development, and our current project, Renew NWO, is funded by Future Skills.
Excellent. Okay, dear viewers, we're going to take a short break here and come right back with more information from Dr. Kathy Sanderson. Welcome back, viewers. You're watching the very first show of Research Matters, and today we're in conversation with Dr. Kathy Sanderson, Associate Professor of Human Resources and Organizational Behavior in the Faculty of Business Administration at Lakehead University. So, Kathy, we had a little overview of the projects you're doing right now, as you say, focus on Northwestern Ontario. Often with research, people wonder, is it just for the fun of it, or is there actually some practical outcomes of this? Can you tell us some of the outcomes that you would have to have, and why does this research matter?
Well, that's a great question. Well, I think that for Northwestern Ontario, probably, it's always difficult to say which is the most important. So I'm going to highlight 2 areas that I think are very important for Northwestern Ontario. The first is that we do not have enough people to meet our labor demands. This situation has been exacerbated by the pandemic, but it existed before, and it will continue to exist into the foreseeable future. Our population growth is steady, some might say stagnant, and we have more people who are leaving the workforce than are joining. So we have more people who are retiring and more people who are leaving Northwestern Ontario than we have an increased birth rate or young people joining the labor force and in migration. Currently in Northwestern Ontario, our unemployment rate is less than the Canadian average. So in May of 2022, our unemployment rate was 4%. The Canadian rate was 5%. That's considered full employment. So why is that so important for Northwestern Ontario? If our businesses want to grow, they need people to be able to do that. And when we're at full employment and we know that our labor participation rate is declining, we won't have enough people to help those businesses grow, to help our communities stay vital and healthy. And so one of the things that we're hoping to do with our research is learn more about retention. How do we keep people who come to Northwestern Ontario in Northwestern Ontario? And that isn't just new immigrants, it's all kinds of newcomers. So when we have someone who moves from, let's say, a First Nation community into Thunder Bay, how do we keep them in our workforce? How do we make someone who moves from another province into Northwestern Ontario feel welcomed? And how do we make sure that they will have a good career and a good life here so that they'll want to stay and make contributions to Northwestern Ontario? So I think that's one of the main reasons why this research is important. The second part is that all employees deserve to have a workplace that has high levels of health and safety. Now, we often think of that in terms of physical health and safety, but as we've seen throughout the pandemic and the recent increase in interest in things like mental health, is that psychological health and safety is also very important for employees. And employers have those responsibilities under, for example, the Ontario Human Rights Code. And so what we want to do is to be able to give employers in Northwestern Ontario ideas about how they can make their workplaces healthier for everyone. And that includes things like inclusion and welcoming, and also ways that we can make sure that all employees are feeling valued so that they can make their maximum contribution within the workplace.
Well, we certainly know that retention is an issue in Northwestern Ontario. It's probably an issue in a number of parts of Canada as well, especially for rural and remote communities. Do you feel that your results will be replicable elsewhere as well, and take that from nationally to even internationally?
That's a very good question. We certainly see some similarities when we're studying remote and rural communities. There's, I think, some unique factors to Northwestern Ontario when we're taking into consideration that we are so far from a major centre, and as a result, we don't have populations to draw on the way that a remote or rural community that is, say, within 200 kilometers of Toronto would have. But certainly we have seen that in other areas, such as in northeastern Ontario, that some of those concerns related to retention are the same. And that outside of the main areas of Vancouver, Toronto, and Montreal, that most areas in Canada right now are struggling with retention of employees and making sure that they have enough employees to meet their needs. I think one of the other things that's unique about Northwestern Ontario is that since we do have, the Thunder Bay campus located here in Northwestern Ontario, that we can partner with our local employers and we can work with them to help answer some of the questions that they might have. And I think sometimes businesses don't realize that they can contact the university, they can contact, someone like myself and say, here's a problem I have with my human resources. How can you help me to get some meaningful data that would enable some good decisions to be made in terms of what should we do next? What could our next steps be?
I know a lot of your research is focused on women and women in the workplace, but will there also be other kind of subsections you're looking at, like younger workers, older workers, different religions, different cultural backgrounds?
Absolutely. So all of the research projects that we're involved with right now, while we do have a focus on certain populations, we have opened up our surveys and our interviews to employees across Northwestern Ontario, and we have been collecting information related to diversity. So we'll be able to identify the size of the community and gender and age, those kinds of factors. And we know that the retention of youth in this area is an interest, I think, to many organizations and also to many families.
So it's clearly important on an economic benefit, but it's also probably also much on a social benefit for the region to say, how can we keep the people here who want to stay here, not in terms of jobs, but also a quality of life, but also how can we recruit new immigrants? Because clearly that's what is absolutely needed.
Absolutely. There's only so many ways that you can grow your labor supply, and the attraction of new immigrants will be key if Northwestern Ontario is going to have enough employees for the future. And of course, Northwestern Ontario doesn't necessarily resemble many of the places that immigrants are coming from. And so we do need to be thinking about how can we get people involved in our communities, how can they become attached and have meaningful relationships with existing residents who will be able to welcome them and to provide them with some of the supports and information that they might need in order to fully participate within our communities.
Excellent. All right, again, viewers, we're going to take a short break and we'll be back very soon to resume our talk with Dr. Kathy Sanderson. Welcome back, viewers. And again, we're here with Dr. Kathy Sanderson, who's talking to us about her work in Northwestern Ontario. And we've always got many new projects that are happening. I know you've given us some background on what you're working on right now, but what are some of the newer ones that you want to do, Kathy?
There are two projects that are upcoming this summer that I'm really excited to be able to tell the viewers about. I'm part of a research center that's called EPID at Work, which stands for Enhancing the Prevention of Injury and Disability at Work. And it is a research center led by Dr. Vicki Chrisman. And we have just received funding from the Ministry of Labor, Training and Skills Development. And as a result, two of the projects that I had proposed that I will be leading are being funded and will start this summer. These are longer term projects that are community-based and going to be looking at, I think, two really important areas for Northwestern Ontario. The first is called Small Business Big Hurdles. And this project is going to engage small businesses that are not currently participating in health and safety initiatives. We know that small business face a lot of barriers when it comes to participating in health and safety. And certainly over the last couple of years, just surviving has been the goal of most small businesses. And health and safety often just doesn't quite get the priority that perhaps it's needed. And so our project is going to work with small business owners, 20 small businesses within Northwestern Ontario, to identify what are some of the reasons why they haven't been able to engage in health and safety interventions or training or policy, and how could we help them to be able to do that. And so we will be tailoring interventions or trainings or policies for those organizations. And of course, measuring to see, were the interventions helpful, were they successful for both the business owner and the employees. So that's one of the projects that we have upcoming. The second one is related to mental health stigma. I think we've heard a lot about mental health in the workplace in the last couple of years. And so mental health stigma is the negative association that's connected when you identify as having a mental health issue in the workplace. When we have high levels of mental health stigma, people are unlikely to seek help. They are more likely to try to hide what's happening to them. And we end up seeing a lot of negative outcomes for employees and organizations. And so this project, which also will be occurring over the next 2 to 3 years, is going to engage employers and employees to find out what are the workplace factors that contribute to having a high level of mental health stigma, and of course the opposite. What are the factors that are effective in reducing mental health stigma at work? And so we'll be looking at things such as organizational culture and climate, which are really just fancy ways of saying leadership styles and communication patterns, group and team dynamics within workplaces, supervisory styles. And we will, of course, be looking at our results as a whole for Northwestern Ontario, but we're also going to be able to give individual reports to organizations so that they can see, here's an area where we might be struggling with mental health stigma, and here are some resources and ideas of how we might be able to address some of that stigma. And so both of those projects will be starting this summer. They will be ongoing for a couple of years, and we're really looking forward to engaging some new businesses, new organizations that we haven't worked with in the past. We already have a few organizations that have signed on for our mental health stigma project, which is wonderful, but we definitely need more and are looking forward to developing those partnerships.
That sounds great. I mean, we certainly do know that in this region, as in many parts of Canada, the small, medium-sized businesses really are the backbone. But often they just don't have the resources to do all the things that they need to do. They may not have great human resources. They may not have, ability to work safely. So it sounds like this is going to be very, very useful for those smaller businesses.
Absolutely. And I think you're right. The business owners don't have time to find out what are the high quality resources, what are the best ways to address this problem. And that's something that we can do. Right? That's something that our interdisciplinary research teams will be able to do. We also have a large partnership with a group of employers that's called Superior Mental Wellness at Work. And we will have access to all kinds of different resources that we can provide to those small and medium and even the larger organizations so that they will be able to sort of benefit immediately from participation within these research projects. So we'll be able to provide those resources for them.
One of the things when we think about injury prevention and health and safety with businesses, I guess we typically maybe think in an old-fashioned way of, well, what happened to your back or your leg, something like this. But, what I'm kind of excited about your research and Epi at Work is to bring in that other disability, which is really mental health disability, and to recognize it and to also recognize, what are the things that are barriers, because it too is a disability that has effects on people's performances and absenteeism.
Absolutely. And some of the recent statistics show that there are more people off of work because of stress-related issues, which are also associated with things like mental health and addictions, than there are physical issues. And so we know that this is an area that is a very large concern across Canada. But we also know that Northwestern Ontario has higher rates of mental health and addictions than most parts of the country. And so these projects, I think, are really timely, and they are of importance to local employers. And we have heard through past employer surveys that being able to address mental health and helping workers to reduce stress are some of the top priorities within sort of employee wellness programs and priorities.
And at the end of it all, when 2 to 3 year long project with lots of data being generated, how would you see the knowledge mobilization? How would you see these results being made useful to those who actually need to know about it?
Right. Well, one of the things that's sort of built into our research, of course, is that when an organization agrees to participate in a research project such as this, they receive a personalized report. So they'll receive a report just for their organization. And if they had a specific concern, we could help them to address that. But in terms of the general population, I think that one of the great resources through EPID at Work is what's called EPID Talks. And those are 4 sessions that are organized each year. They have been virtual, and I expect in the future they will be both in person and virtual. And these are 4 times a year where researchers get together with community members and other organizations, and we talk about what some of the results have been. They might be preliminary results, they might be final results, so that we can spread that information widely. The other thing that we always make sure for the projects that I've been working with is that we have very active social media. For example, for the resilience project that I'm working on right now, We have a website, renewnwo.ca, and it has links to all of our social media and how to get in contact with us. And we want to be able to be reaching out to the general population as much as possible so that they know what we're doing.
Excellent. Thank you, Kathy, for providing these important and unique insights and information on your research projects. I wish you very best on your future research and your endeavors. So, viewers, thank you for joining us for Research Matters. Dr. Kathy Sanderson, Associate Professor of Human Resources and Organizational Behavior at Lakehead University, spoke to us about her research on advancing employment knowledge and social equity. So, we're going to meet again for another dynamic researcher from Lakehead University to discuss a new research area. And again, my name is Andrew Dean. I'm the Vice President of Research and Innovation at Lakehead University and wishing you the very best.